My mother looked at me across that table like I was a stranger holding a gun. And maybe I was, because the paper in my hand proved that the man who coached my Little League games, who taught me to change a tire in a Walmart parking lot, who cried at my high school graduation like it was the proudest moment of his entire life, was not my father. Not by blood, not by DNA, not by a single strand of anything science could measure. And the worst part? She had known the whole time. My name is Cole Briggs, and the day I opened an $89 DNA kit changed every memory I ever had. This is the story of how one truth destroyed my family and why I chose to walk away forever. Before we go any further, if you've ever questioned something about your past, about who you really are, hit that like button and subscribe. This channel is built for people who've lived through moments that most people wouldn't believe. You're not alone. Now, let's go back to the beginning. It started the way most catastrophic things do, innocently. It was the holiday season, and my sister Brandy had decided we were all going to do DNA tests together. She'd seen an ad online, thought it'd be fun. We'll find out if we're actually part Cherokee, like Mama always said. She laughed when she said it. We all did. I was 34 years old, working construction out of a depot yard about 40 minutes outside of town. I came home every evening to my dog, my truck, and a frozen dinner I didn't bother to heat all the way through. Life was simple, quiet, and I liked it that way. The kit sat on my counter for 2 weeks before I finally mailed it in. I almost didn't. 6 weeks later, an email landed in my inbox at 6:47 in the morning. Your Ancestry DNA results are ready. I almost deleted it. I was running late for work. Almost. I clicked it, scrolled through the ethnicity breakdown, mostly what I expected, some things that surprised me. And then I saw a tab I hadn't noticed before. DNA matches. I tapped it. And that's when the world as I knew it quietly began to end. DNA matching works like this. The platform compares your genetic data against everyone else who's taken the test. It tells you how closely related you are. Cousins, aunts, grandparents. My sister Brandy showed up immediately. 49% shared DNA. That's exactly right for a full sibling. My mother's side populated quickly after that. Names I recognized, second cousins I'd met at reunions, a great aunt I remembered from childhood. But my father's side? Nothing. Not one match. I figured it was a glitch. These things happen. I went to work, tried not to think about it. But that night I logged back in. Still nothing on his side. And then I saw it. A match at 48%. That's not a cousin. That's not a half-uncle. That is a sibling, or a parent. The profile name was R. Leland. I had never heard that name in my life. I sat there for 3 hours trying to rationalize it. Bad batch of tests, lab error, user error, something. But I'm a construction guy. I deal in measurements, in what's real and what holds weight. And this number, 48%, held weight. So I did what any reasonable person spiraling into quiet panic does at midnight. I started digging. It took me 4 days to find him. Raymond Leland, 61 years old, retired railroad worker, lived 42 miles from the town I grew up in. He had a Facebook profile, mostly private, but his profile photo was public. And I want you to understand what it felt like to look at that face, because it looked like mine. Not in a vague, that's interesting kind of way. My nose, the way his eyes sat just slightly deep set, the same widow's peak I'd spent 30 years combing around every morning. I set the phone face down on the table, and I sat in the dark for a long time. I could have stopped right there, closed the app, convinced myself it was coincidence,
but there was a message sitting in my DNA inbox. R. Leland had messaged me 2 weeks ago, before I'd even looked at my results. His message was 4 sentences. I don't know if you'll see this. I don't know what you know. I've been carrying something for a long time. If you want to talk, I'm here. 4 sentences that had been sitting in my inbox like a ticking clock, waiting for me to be ready. I wasn't sure I ever would be, but I wrote back. I didn't go to Raymond first. I went to my mother. She lived 40 minutes away in the same house I grew up in, same green shutters, same cracked driveway, same wind chimes my dad hung the summer I was 7. She made coffee. She always made coffee. It's what she did when she didn't know what to do with her hands. I sat down at the table and I slid the printed email across to her. The DNA results, the match percentage, Raymond Leland's name. She didn't look at it. She already knew what it said. "Mama." She didn't answer. "Mama, look at me." When she finally did, her eyes were already full, and she said the words I will never unhear for the rest of my life. I was going to take it to my grave. Her name was Donna Briggs, 58 years old, Sunday school teacher, made the best pecan pie in the county, had been married to my father, Earl Briggs, for 36 years. And 35 years ago, before she married him, she had a brief relationship with a man named Raymond Leland. She ended it, chose Earl, married him 6 months later, and 2 months after the wedding, she found out she was pregnant. She told herself the timing could work, that it was Earl's, that it had to be Earl's. She told herself that every single day for 34 years. I asked her the question I needed to ask most. Does Dad know? She looked at her coffee, and that silence told me everything. Or so I thought. Because the answer she gave me was not the one I expected. My father, Earl Briggs, was not the kind of man who talked about feelings. He talked about weather, about the price of lumber, about whether the county road crew was ever going to fix the pothole on Route 9. He shook hands firmly, paid his bills early, showed up when people needed him. He was the most decent human being I had ever known. My mother told me, through tears she couldn't stop, that Earl had suspected. Not known, suspected. A few years into the marriage, something made him wonder. A date didn't quite add up, a comment someone made. He never asked her directly, and she never told him. They just kept living, kept building a life, kept raising me and Brandy. And somewhere in the unspoken space between them, they made a choice to keep going. I drove to his job site that afternoon. He was finishing up, tossing his gear into the truck bed. He looked up and saw me and grinned. "What are you doing out this way?" I couldn't speak for a moment. He tilted his head, read my face the way fathers do. And quietly, with no drama, he said, "You found out, didn't you?" Not a question. He told me that he'd made peace with it a long time ago. That he chose me every single morning he chose me. Not out of obligation, not because he was trapped, because I was his son, full stop. DNA's just a number, Cole. I was there. I stayed. That's what a father is. I broke down right there in that gravel parking lot. And this 60-year-old man who never talked about feelings held his 34-year-old son while he fell apart. That was the last good moment before everything else unraveled. because I still had to decide what to do about Raymond Leland and about my mother. And those two things were going to cost me more than I was ready to pay. I met Raymond Leland on a Tuesday. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in the back booth, coffee in front of him, hands flat on the table. He stood when he saw me come in, and we just looked at each other. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. He told me he'd taken the test 2 years ago at the urging of his daughter, his other daughter, his legitimate daughter, as a family history project. When my name came up as a near sibling match, he said he sat in his truck in a parking lot for an hour before he could drive home. He'd had a brief relationship with a woman named Donna 35 years ago. He never knew about a pregnancy, never knew about me. He'd thought about reaching out for 2 years. He'd almost talked himself out of it 100 times.
He said he wasn't asking for anything, didn't want to disrupt my life, wasn't looking for a son, not if I didn't want that. He just needed me to know that if I ever wanted a door, his was open. I want to be honest with you. The meeting with Raymond didn't break me. It was almost peaceful. He was a decent man who had been kept from a truth that belonged to him as much as it belonged to me. He didn't owe me anything. I didn't owe him anything. But we shared something that no one could take away, even if neither of us knew what to do with it yet. What broke me was going back to my mother's house, because by that point, Brandy knew. And Brandy was devastated in a different way. The way that younger siblings get devastated when they find out their family was never what they thought. She was angry at Mom, at the years of silence, at the idea that we'd all been living inside a version of our family that wasn't entirely real. And I understood that anger, but I also couldn't hold on to it the way she could. I knocked. My mother answered. And I told her something I had never said to anyone. I told her that I forgave her, not because what she did was okay, not because the lying was okay, not because 34 years of silence was okay, but because forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me, so I could leave without carrying it. I told her I needed time. She nodded, and I walked back to my truck. Here's what nobody tells you about DNA discoveries. It's not really about blood. It was never about blood. It's about the story you thought you were living, and the moment you find out that story had pages you were never allowed to read. Earl Briggs is my father. That is a fact no test can undo. Raymond Leland is a stranger who shares my face. Maybe one day he'll be something more. I don't know. My mother is a woman I love who made a choice born out of fear and kept it out of the same. I understand it. I don't have to be okay with it. I didn't walk away from my family because I stopped loving them. I walked away because I needed to figure out who I was outside of a story someone else had written for me. And for the first time in 34 years, I was finally the one holding the pen. If you've ever discovered something that changed everything, you survived it. That's enough. If this story hits you somewhere real, hit that like button. Subscribe if you're new here, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Every week, we bring you stories that don't make the news, but live in real people's lives. See you in the next one.